All right. Well, good morning, everybody. It's about 10 o'clock Eastern, so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is John Mann, and I'm an assistant professor at Michigan State University, and I work closely with the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development, and I'll be hosting today's webinar. The webinar topic is Growing Lavender, a curriculum for growers. So I want to welcome everybody this morning. Before we start the presentation, I want to highlight just a couple of things. One, we are recording the presentation, and so if you'd like to get access to the link to the recording, please visit the NCRCRD webinar page, and it should be posted there in a couple of days. And second, in the chat box below is the place where all of your questions should be put in. So just go in the chat box as your questions come up, and please enter those. So thanks again for participating. Our presenters today are Seven Mattis, who is an assistant professor in the anthropology department at Michigan State University, and Wynne Wright, who is an associate professor in the Department of Community Sustainability and Sociology at Michigan State University. So today they're going to share a little bit more about a new self-paced online course for lavender growers they're developing. So Seven and Wynne, the floor is yours.
Thank you, John. And good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming on this Monday morning. As John mentioned, my name is Seven Mattis, and over here is...
Hello, Wynne Wright.
And today we'll be talking about Growing Lavender, a curriculum for growers. So today we're going to be looking at the overview of the curriculum, why it is that we're doing the curriculum now, what sort of demand it's answering, and we'll be looking at how this curriculum will not only offer an educational program for interested growers such as some of yourselves, but also how it will strengthen lavender cultivation in general throughout the United States. We'll take a look at what this curriculum looks like, how it's structured, and what each of the modules are made up of. Look at how they're a comprehensive, holistic introduction to growing lavender. As John mentioned, if you do have questions as we go through, please put them down in this webinar chat. I think you all can see it at the bottom here. We're interested in knowing if you have any questions as we go through, but we also are interested in knowing how you ended up at this webinar, if you learned about it through the USLGA conference or some other space. So if you could type that down below, that would be fantastic. We'd just like to know how you ended up at our webinar today.
Okay, we're going to start with a little bit of a background and overview. I can see that some of you are lavender growers, so great. This may be a bit of a review. For those of you who work with lavender growers, perhaps it's useful to get a bit of a big picture overview, and that's what we're going to try to do in these first few slides. What is lavender? Lavender's been a staple in gardens around the globe for centuries. It's a small, woody, aromatic shrub used in the fragrance, specialty food, and traditional healing industries. There are basically two types of lavender grown in the United States. The first one is called an Lavandula angustifolia, its Latin name, and the other is actually a hybrid, Lavandula intermedia, or sometimes called lavandin, particularly in Europe. An angustifolia is what you'll find on most farms. An angustifolia, these tend to be small shrubs. They're quite hardy in most climatic zones. They have a very nice, sweet fragrance. The fragrance has a more distinctive floral note, so the oil extracted from these plants is very commonly used in perfumes. Lavandulas or X intermedia are, as I said, a hybrid. It's a hybrid between an angustifolia and a Lavandula latifolia, also called a spiked lavender. They tend to grow larger, they tend to bloom later, and they produce more spikes than angustifolias. They're very showy. They can rise up to 3 or 4 feet easily in height. They are also very popularly distilled. They have a very high oil content, sometimes as much as 5 times that of angustifolias, but their oil contains more camphor. That's a sharper, woodier fragrance, and the oil tends to be more likely to be used in cleaning products or detergents. You probably realize or think of France as the place where lavender originated, and you wouldn't be wrong, but France is not certainly the only place. Southern Europe, the Mediterranean in general, around the coast of East Africa and Southwest Asia. But lavender has been grown commercially in the United States for quite some time. So what do we use lavender for? Well, I've already mentioned aromatherapy and essential oils, but for a long time, lavender's had many uses. In medieval times, powdered lavender was used as a condiment to preserve or to mask disagreeable flavors. In the 13th century, cuttings were used as floor bedding to keep pests away. Some days still people put lavender in their basement or attic to keep little pests away. In the 17th century, young boys would stand on the streets of cities and sell sprigs of lavender to go into the ladies' bath so that they could scent the water. This is before the days of very commonly used perfume, of course. But commercial lavender production originated in the United States in the 1920s around the area of Seattle. But it blossomed in the 1990s, largely due to the globalization of apples in that region that created a crisis for apple farmers. But essential oils are a very common old purpose. Culinary is a little bit more of a newer purpose. Lots of high-end chefs are now using culinary lavender in their recipes. And of course, medicinal or traditional healing practices, lavender has a long use in that area as well. And today, increasingly, this is something a little bit newer. In the past 30 to 40 years, people are loving to spend time in lavender. As the experience economy in agriculture grows, lavender is very popular as an agritourism opportunity. Everybody wants to get married in a lavender field.
I certainly do.
Or have their photo taken, go do a U-pick with the family. It's akin to an outing, perhaps at a pumpkin patch, that sort of thing. But festivals, U-pick, all sorts of family outings, even corporate retreats are very popular destinations because you have this beautiful, magnificent field of beauty to draw on. So the objective of this curriculum, that we have developed or are in the process of developing was an effort to bring experts in the land-grant universities, in the colleges of agriculture around the country, along with experts in the applied world, growers, maybe some like yourselves who have a great deal of experience growing lavender, together to develop a curriculum so that particularly beginning farmers might have the tools that they need to become expert lavender producers. So why now? One of the things that's really important to understand is radical changes that are taking place in agriculture. Beginning farmers are searching for new farming practices. Existing farmers are searching for new entrepreneurial pathways to make a living on the farm. And increasingly, new crops, particularly those that have the capacity for an experience component, are highly popular. I mentioned pumpkins the other day. Wine would be another one, or grapes for wine production. Flower farming, another one. Any opportunity to get people engaged in agriculture and learn something new while also providing beauty, respite, leisure, recreation are very popular alternatives. And it is like a lot of specialty crops that are growing in popularity. I just mentioned some, but there are also in Michigan anyway, which is where we're located. Hops, herbs, chestnuts, ornamental crops are a rapidly growing sector of the rural economy, in part because some of the conventional crops that farmers have relied upon for many years no longer are fulfilling their ability to help farmers make a living. And the popularity of lavender has been monumental. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of statistics on this. There is the U.S. Lavender Growers Association, as well as a number of regional associations. For example, I belong to the Great Lakes Lavender Growers Association, and a lot of regions have their own specialty organization. But we're seeing these organizations dot the landscape in the past 5 to 10 years because of this growing demand. As I said, lavender really began in earnest in the 1990s in the Pacific Northwest. And there we have the Washington State Lavender Growers Association. We have the Oregon Lavender Growers Association. Colorado is also a very popular state, so we have the Colorado Lavender Growers Association. The U.S. Lavender Growers Association began about 9 years ago, and they just completed their 4th biannual meeting last week in South Carolina. Again, just as another case in point, in Michigan, where we're located, the number of commercial lavender producers has increased by over 400% in the past 5 years. So again, we don't have a lot of numbers, but the USLGA estimates that there are probably around 3,000 lavender growers in the country right now. A lot of them often fly under the radar because they're small, or perhaps they're growing lavender in combination with other crops. But there is a booming interest in lavender production. And another interesting phenomenon that's taking place is that many of these lavender growers are new to agriculture altogether. Many of them also happen to be women, women who've traditionally not had access to the same sort of resources, particularly training from land-grant universities that males have had in agriculture. So with this population that's new to agriculture, and the fact that women sometimes don't have the same access to resources that men do in agriculture, this creates another new opportunity or important reason that we need to think about developing a curriculum for these growers. And lastly, I just want to say one also very important thing. New growers who are inexperienced in agriculture to some degree are also at a higher risk. They're very vulnerable to plant diseases. And there is one disease, unfortunately, that we have quite a bit of having more experience with, and that's called Phytophthora. Phytophthora is a root and crown disease that's devastating to the roots if it is waterlogged. And increasingly, a number of growers around the country are experiencing Phytophthora. And this is a very contagious disease that can spread throughout new plants and existing plants. It can be spread through water, moving water. It can be also spread through the soles of your shoes and the equipment that you use, and it can be devastating to your soil. It is very hard, if not impossible, to get rid of Phytophthora. Therefore, you may inadvertently contaminate your soil for many years to come. Therefore, it's very important to understand the consequences of this disease so that one produces their plants free of any sort of plant pathology, but particularly Phytophthora.
So to answer this growing demand and this boom in lavender cultivation, there's a lot of new beginning growers and those looking to diversify their farms who need a little bit more instructional programming and mentoring. So while there is already a handful of lavender resources currently available, a lot of them are created by growers themselves, which is fantastic. But what we're lacking is comprehensive science-based resources, which creates a bit of an educational void that extension programs like MSU's Extension is looking to fill. So this curriculum, Growing Lavender, a curriculum for growers, is an answer to that demand for further education on lavender production. And I wanted to note that it's funded and supported by the USDA's North Central Regional Center for Rural Development. It works with land-grant universities, Kansas State and Michigan State, and with the support of USLGA, the United States Lavender Growers Association. And of course, with other lavender growers, like some of yourselves, to help peer review and develop the modules themselves. Also, I know some of you have just jumped on, and so one of the questions we wanted to know, if you haven't added it to the web chat, is how you came to find this webinar, whether it was at the USLGA conference that happened recently or through another means. Please type it into the chat box below because we'd love to know. So this curriculum is aimed at both beginner growers and experienced growers. So I see a lot of you come from kind of new farms. Some of you are experienced growers. So those that are interested in getting into lavender farming, or those who are interested in diversifying their farm and adding lavender, this curriculum is aimed at both of you. So we also are really proud of how our curriculum is quite attentive to regional diversity. So it's applicable across various regions throughout the United States. Our module developers who helped create the curriculum are from all around the United States. And in addition to that, because we want to make sure that every region is covered, we have vignettes and case studies and grower expert perspectives that ensure that it's not just set in one region, just regardless of where the diverse group of module developers are from. So what does this curriculum actually look like? So because we recognize that everybody who comes to this curriculum is coming from a different place, different profession. We all have busy lives. This curriculum is self-paced. It's completely independent. So it's not so much like a classroom setting where you're with other students. You can start and stop whenever you need. It's just you and the modules, which will be hosted on MSU's, Michigan State University's Desire to Learn program. So there's a total of 7 modules. They each cover a significant aspect of lavender planting. So everything from how do you select your plants to how do you end up marketing those plants that you harvest. Within each of these modules, we have the grower expert perspective, and this is a perspective that adds an additional regional diversity and another on-the-ground perspective for each topic. The main part of each module is a 1 to 2 hour voice-over PowerPoint presentation. So while you're not in a classroom setting, it's kind of like having a teacher that you can start and stop whenever you need to. There's also resources and a learner checklist. So the resources will be additional places, either videos or books or articles that you can click on to check out, go a little bit more in depth where the module leaves off. And the learner checklist is especially helpful because once you do go through the module and you get started in your lavender production, you can then take a look at your checklist and make sure you have all bases checked without going through the PowerPoint again. And then finally, there's a quiz to make sure that you're taking in all of the key points in each module. And once you've completed all 7 of these modules, you will be issued a certificate to show that you are ready to go in lavender production. So to create this curriculum, we have had it designed, peer-reviewed, and created by regionally diverse university researchers and experienced growers. All of the growers who contributed to this particular curriculum have been growing for 3 years or more. So this partnership between university researchers and the experienced growers have resulted in a holistic, grounded perspective throughout every curriculum topic, from plant selection to marketing. So not only did it result in a comprehensive coverage of the topics we're looking at, but it also served to unite and connect within the ever-growing lavender community. So this is just an example of some of the module developers that created our curriculum. So as you can see, we have representatives from Oregon, Colorado, Washington, right here in Michigan, Indiana, New Mexico, and so on. And just a reminder, we have additional case studies, grower perspectives that add even more regional diversity. So I see there's about 27 of you. If you wouldn't mind, if you have the webinar chat open, we'd love to know what state you're from, if you can type it in there below, just to see where you guys are representing and coming from. We've got some Michigan. Hello there, fellow neighbors. So once you do finish the 7 modules of the curriculum and get issued your certificate, the program doesn't stop there. We also are offering a mentor program that will connect the students who go through the curriculum with experienced growers in your regional area. So we do this because we know that the curriculum, you're going to have further questions as you go on. We want to make sure that there's somebody on hand who's experienced and ready to answer questions. But this will also serve to lessen plant pathology risk in your particular region. It will avoid the initial beginner problems because you're going to be talking with somebody who already went through them and came up with solutions. And And this will again build community, kind of connect new growers and with those who are experienced, having an ongoing peer and colleague community.
So last but not least, what's in the curriculum? As Seven said, we have 7 different modules that make up the curriculum. And I'm just going to go through the highlights of these 7 to give you an idea of what to expect. The first module is called Why and How to Grow Lavender. In this particular module, we're going to just expose you to a big picture overview. We're going to get the students who are taking this module to think about lavender as a business. Perhaps you've been gardening or something for a while, and really answer those questions that may be difficult in some cases. Is lavender for me? Is commercial lavender production for me? And sometimes the answer is no, and perhaps this is where you stop, and that might save you a lot of heartache and money down the road. We hope not, of course, but it's still a very important question to ask oneself. Module 2 is called Establishing Lavender. Here's where we get into climate zones, water, soil, sun, airflow, all these growing conditions, as well as site selection issues and planting issues that are critical to getting off to a good start. Module 3, Selecting Lavender Varieties. Wow, this one is where do you even start or stop? There are so many cultivars. Some people say 200, 300. I really don't even like to throw a number out there because I'm not really sure anybody knows. But all the varieties, which varieties are for me? Which ones should I plant? What do I want to do with my lavender? What's the end use? Therefore, how should I get there? What varieties will help me get there? Am I going to be growing for culinary purposes? Do I want a red lavender or a pink lavender? What are the growing habits, the hardiness, the shape? Those sorts of issues you'll find in this module. Managing your lavender crop. This is, of course, issues related to labor inputs, the seasonality of the crop, processes, how do I prune, how to manage pests, and also diseases that might be confronted with. Module 5, Harvesting and Caring for your harvested lavender. How to harvest, how to dry, how to process my lavender, how to store my crop, what tools do I need? Those are topics for Module 5. In Module 6, Developing your farm's business plan. Well, most of us want to make money as commercial lavender growers, right? So how to become familiar with the business aspects of starting a lavender farm is what we take up in this module. Very critical ingredient to a successful commercial operation. And Module 7, of course, how do we get to the money? Marketing. How do we market our lavender and the farm? Become familiar with all of the different ways that different growers around the country are doing this. And there's probably no 2 models. Everybody's got a very different business plan and market for their farm and their lavender. And this will give you some ideas in Module 7. So that's sort of a big picture overview. Now, 7's going to tell you, how do I get to this wonderful curriculum?
Yeah, so I'm sure now you guys are all itching to sign up. Or if you already are a grower, we would love it if you would tell people who are interested, who come to your farm maybe and say, hey, I really want to get into lavender farming. Can you teach me? You can say, well, guess what? There's a curriculum that can teach you. It's only $30 for the curriculum, and it will be completely online at Michigan State University's Desire to Learn service. So we're going to be launching in spring 2019, so it's coming up real soon. If you are interested in being notified when it launches, you have 2 options. You can click on our Facebook page there and add yourself to our group. We're going to be announcing the launch on that page. Or you can also put your email address down on this webinar chat here, and we'll be sure to sign you up. We're going to be sending just 1 email. We're not going to spam you. Just 1 email letting you know when it launches and how it is you can go to sign up. We also have a Growing Lavender blog webpage that will give you instructions once it does launch. Oh, fantastic. You guys are already signing up. And we just want to let you know that you are free to contact us at any time to ask questions about the curriculum. Or if you don't get your email down here, or if you don't get signed up, feel free to email us and we'll make sure that you are signed up on our list so that we can let you know when it does launch. So also, if anybody has any questions, please type them up here. Let me see if I can scroll up here and see if there's any that were asked while we talked.
We're happy to answer any questions that you might have in what time we have remaining, if we can.
Great. So this is John. I've got one question for you. While those in the audience are typing in your questions in the chat box below, could you talk just really briefly about how you're going to differentiate the content for both new and experienced growers? You said the course is good for both. So how might how might it benefit one group versus the other?
Yeah, that's a good question, John. While we have marketed this largely to beginning growers, we do think because it was designed by growers who had at least 5 years experience, but I will say most of the writers of the curriculum from the grower perspective probably had closer to 15 or 20 years experience. So there were times when we had to say, oh, this is so wonderful, but you're going into a little bit too much detail. But I think the experienced grower will find that there's some nuggets there that they can benefit from. This has been a peer-reviewed document. That means other scientists and other growers reviewed the original module, and therefore were able to also reinforce that the content of the material was accurate, and many of those reviewers time and time again told us how much they had learned, even though they were seasoned growers, from reviewing the curriculum. So we think there'll be something for both categories of people here.
Great, thank you for that. Another quick question. So I'm curious, what's the biggest question that you guys get in terms of new lavender growers? What's like the most challenging thing? What's the biggest question that new growers have?
I'm sorry, did you say what's the question most growers have?
Well, for most new growers, what's the biggest question that comes up for most new growers? I just wonder if there was a kind of a typical question that always gets asked.
I think a lot of growers want to know about marketing. I've grown this beautiful lavender, now what do I do with it? That's the one I seem to get a lot. And also people are also very interested in site selection issues. Where do I plant my lavender? What kind of soil conditions? What location of my farm is best suited for growing lavender? That's another common question. I see a couple of questions at the bottom here. Someone is asking, I'm not a grower, but I'm curious about the amount of land needed. That's a really good question because to some degree it will depend on where you're located. For example, in Michigan we typically talk about the size of our farms in plants. I have 900 plants. I have 2,000 plants. On the West Coast they typically are more likely to use acreage. I'd say the common farm in Michigan is probably less than 1 acre. So over on the West Coast, though, you may see 5 to 10 acres. That wouldn't be terribly uncommon. So usually about 2,000, 2,500 plants constitute 1 acre. So as a beginning farmer, let me just tell you, 2,000 plants is a lot. And of course, it's going to require some additional labor input beyond one individual. So this is a very intensive crop production, mostly on the scale that it's grown in the United States. There's very little mechanization. So that means every plant is touched multiple times throughout the season. So I'm not sure I'm answering you because it's a complicated answer to that question. I see another one. Are you aware of courses available with other herbs for small-scale growers? As a flower farmer, I'm working to add culinary specialty herbs. I'm not, but you might try other land-grant universities. There are a lot of beginning farmer programs out there. I'm not sure that any particularly pertain to herbs, but I believe I've come across a few that pertain to flowers. Flower farming has exploded as well in the past few years, and there's a lot of attention being paid to this population.
Looks like we have another question. For the mentor program, are you going to place us with regional mentors or with climate partners? So they say, for example, we are in Region 2, but our climate is not similar to those in the North, Southern, Central California.
You will be placed with growers who are as close to you as possible. The matching, of course, is reliant upon the goodwill of the volunteers, the mentors. And so we will hopefully be able to find someone in your region. By that I mean within the same state, ideally, or a couple of states near you. However, there are a lot of lessons to be learned by being partnered with other people, regardless of climate, particularly when it comes to markets and also experience. So it's possible that there'll be several mentors that will be in your network for different reasons.
Oh, it says for harvesting, does it take machinery, and what's the startup cost?
Yeah, again, no. Most harvesting is done, particularly on a moderate to small scale, by hand. As I said, it gets touched a lot. Usually you're using a sickle to harvest a lavender plant. The startup cost, of course, depend upon how much size. So that could range from a few hundred to a few $1,000s per acre. And that is kind of something that's taken up a little bit more thoroughly in the business plan section, because I don't want to mislead. But there are not a lot of mechanization requirements that are really often the brunt of the cost for startup in other farm operations.
So there was a question a little bit earlier by Jean, and they were asking what type of disease is Phytotheria?
Phytophthora is root and crown rot disease. It's usually propagated or perpetuated, I should say, through the transfer of spores in the water. Unfortunately, some farmers have found that they are finding Phytophthora infested in their plants when they arrive on the farm. This is very disconcerting, which means as a grower, it is incumbent upon you to do your research in who you buy your plants from. This is a very serious disease, and you want to make sure you're getting your lavender cuttings from a reliable source. Let me also say, which I don't think I did earlier, that most growers start their plants from cuttings, not seeds, because when lavender is started from seed, it does not grow true to its parent plant. Therefore, cuttings are the only way to make sure you have a pure line of that particular cultivar. So most farmers will order their cuttings from a reputable company in the fall, and their order will be shipped to them by, whenever the season begins in their region. I typically put hours in the ground here in Michigan in around late May, early June. A lot of growers do produce organic production with organic production methods. However, they may not be registered as organic with the USDA. I'm in central New York, and I'm hoping for a small lavender farm. How can I be sure the lavender will grow well in my climate? I visited Victor's lavender farm in Sequim and ordered plants from him. How can I be sure it will grow in my area? Well, the first thing you want to do is a soil test. What kind of soil do you have? Do you have sandy, loamy soil? Do you have soil that's between a pH of 6.5 and 7.5? Is that soil well drained? There are a lot of techniques, and you'll find some of these techniques in the curriculum for learning how to determine if that is appropriate soil. Those things I just mentioned are sort of the key characteristics of good soil. Sunlight, also another characteristic. In Michigan, we sometimes don't get as much sun as we would like. Good 6 or 7 hours. Lavender, remember those Mediterranean conditions, rocky soil, lots of sun, hot, long days. Lavender thrives in these conditions. Could you be more specific in regards to release date as well as different zones and begin spring planting? I guess I'm not following this. Release date of the curriculum, I can't be terribly specific because we're still in the review stages, and it kind of depends on how quickly our reviewers finish up. We're hoping that mid-March, early April at the latest, quite honestly. I can't imagine that it will take more than that, but mid-March, early April. And I realize that you may want to get started taking the curriculum so that you're going to get your, but you're not putting, regardless of where you live, you're not putting your lavender in the field until May or June. So definitely by then. Let me also say that lavender is grown in the United States in every state except Alaska. So wherever you live, there's a good chance that you can grow lavender. Now, your property may be difficult. In the South, it's very difficult because they have terribly clay soils, so they often have to amend their soil. But keep in mind, it can be done. Okay, well, these are really great questions. Thank you so much for your interest. I hope that we've tried to answer most of them. If you would like, you're welcome to send us other questions to our emails that we mentioned earlier, and we will do our best to try to answer them for you until the curriculum is ready. Again, thank you for your interest, and please, if you know of other friends or neighbors, let me encourage you also. Lavender growers are incredibly inviting and supportive people. As a member of the U.S. Lavender Growers Association Executive Board, I can tell you that so many lavender growers are very eager to help you get started. We want to see this community grow and do well from the beginning. So feel free to look around your state and learn who else is growing lavender. I bet you that they will be very happy to give you a tour and also give you some advice. That's certainly the culture that I'm familiar with in many of the states in the Midwest. Okay?
Okay, well, thank you both for the wonderful presentation. For those of you in the audience, once again, if you'd like a copy of this this webinar, please visit the NCRCRD webinar page. And I want to say thank you to our presenters, Seven Mattis and Wynne Wright. Great presentation today, and thanks for you in the audience for participating. And with that, we will conclude the webinar.
Thank you all.
Seven and Wynne, I will say post-webinar, it looks like a couple of questions popped up. I don't know if you want to try to answer them or if you want to just respond via email or something like that.
You mean type the answer into the cell?
Sure, you could type the answer or you could just respond. I think we're still recording, so we'll go over our allotted window here just in case.
What is the best way to winterize plants in a snowy climate such as mine? Debbie James is asking, well, the answer to this question is often to use a frost barrier cloth. These, particularly for smaller farms, this is increasingly a common technique that can be put on early winter and taken off early spring. Danielle's asking, I'm a beekeeper too. I just shared info about joining USLGA to others in my group in Nevada. So important. Oh, that's great. Yes, a very, very good point. I wish we'd thought to elaborate on that. Good partnership between the bees and lavender. Thank you, thank you. Okay, I think that's it, John.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. And with that, we will conclude the webinar.
All right.
Thank you, John.